used to from candidate forum perspective, because it's not really going to be a forum, it's going to be an interview. Welcome Trish Ranson, by the way. We booked this program back in April, and since then I, on many occasions, tried to reach out to Andrew Muchmore and confirm his participation. Many weeks ago I heard that he had a conflict today and would not participate with the League of Women Voters Forum tonight. And I continued to send emails and text messages and leave voicemails with no response until Friday, when I sent an email. I always send an email a week or two ahead of time to say, we're coming up, here's some of the rules you need to think about, be prepared. I added a paragraph to this particular race that said the board has met and discussed, while I was in Europe, the board met and discussed this particular forum, and if only one candidate shows up, we're going to move forward with an interview. And within 45 minutes, I got a response asking for a reschedule, and I said that wasn't possible. We're booking into April. We don't have, a few weeks ago, we could have made some changes. At this point, we can't. So we're going to proceed as the board decided. So, Trish Ranson, welcome.
Thank you.
We wish Andrew Muchmore the best, by the way. And anyway, so this will be a little different. I plan to ask some questions. I plan to maybe open it up to the floor for some questions, which I don't normally do, because we try to make sure the questions are balanced and don't attack or target a particular candidate. But we have our incumbent here, and what the heck, we'll turn it loose. So,
what the heck?
anyway, so we're going to start off, Trish, and we're not going to do an opening statement. I'll just let you do a close at the end. But let's talk about State Question 833.
Okay.
It's going to be on the ballot coming up in November. It would add a section to the Constitution creating public infrastructure districts. It would require 100% of the properties in that district to sign off on a petition saying that they agree to be part of it. So talk about it a little bit. What do you think of this? Is this a good idea? Is it a bad idea?
Sure.
Where do you stand on it?
All right. Well, before we begin, I do want to introduce a couple of my guests today. First and foremost, my husband, Andrew Ranson, is here. #1 fan. You have to be married to someone who runs for office multiple times. So thank you very much for being here. Also, Cameron Paulson is my campaign coordinator. She's a recent graduate from OSU. Go Pokes. And she is fabulous. Come November 6th, she's going to need a job. So anybody have an idea about marketing, hit her up afterwards. State Question 833. Just to kind of give you a background as to how questions come on the ballot. There's two ways that a question could come on the ballot. Number one is if the people ask for it. They send out petitions, they get the signatures, they get everything with the Secretary of State. It's scheduled for an election, and then it gets on the ballot. That's one way. The other way is for the legislature to put a question on the ballot. So State Question 833 comes from the legislature. And I recall when this bill came up to the floor, because we had to vote to put it on the ballot, and it was one of those discussions where the bill author was a little vague. Okay, so there's like an unspoken rule within the majority that when you put up a bill, you explain it enough that people understand what they're voting on, but not too much to garner questions. So,
But it's a balancing act.
Exactly. But being a minority member, that is my job, is to ask questions. So there were quite a few questions on this bill, and it was kind of the feeling that I got on the floor was either the bill author didn't know what the bill would do, or they didn't want to say too much, because then that would reveal where the bill came from. So already 2 red flags for me. And so what this does is, yes, it creates the PIDs, if you will. So it allows for, like, you can do bonds for development and so forth. It sounds really good that it's 100% have to sign on, but it could very well be one person. So one company or one developer buys up a whole big part of land, goes for the bond, gets it, then when they build on it, passes that taxation onto the people who are purchasing homes there, or if you will. On one hand, it will help foster development. On the other hand, It could saddle people with more tax burden, which then when the school bond election comes along, then maybe they don't want to do that because their taxes are high enough. And I think it causes a rift and a division between the haves and the have-nots. And I think that overall in the community, I don't think it's a good thing. I am personally not going to vote for it, and I voted against it on the floor when it came up as well.
Okay, let's move on to 834.
834.
Which is very
oh
different.
Yeah, let's get on to
Which
834.
is very different. Okay, it also came from the legislature.
Yes, it did.
It would make it unconstitutional, or make it basically unconstitutional, because it would be in our Constitution for non-citizens to vote in the state of Oklahoma. On the other hand, it's already illegal for non-citizens to register to vote. In fact, it's a felony for a non-citizen to register to vote.
Correct.
So, talk to me about this. Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Does it reinforce our existing law?
I mean, it just makes it super illegal. I mean, it's already illegal. So it just makes it super illegal. And that's what I had a problem with it on the floor too. And, you know, and I'm like, okay, somebody's gonna look at my vote on this and they're gonna go, you voted against this? I'm like, well, I vote against the premise because it's misleading to the public, especially when we have such angry rhetoric on immigration currently. And then we put this question on the ballot that says you have to be a citizen to vote. Folks who are not privy to the fact that it is already illegal to vote are going to think, oh my gosh, we have people here in this country illegally and they're voting? No, we don't. We found zero election fraud here in a recent survey this last year. And so I think it's just disingenuous. How you vote on it doesn't matter, quite honestly. It's still illegal. So going forward.
So arguing the other side, what it does do is embeds it in the Constitution. So some future legislature couldn't make it possible for a local school district to allow anybody to vote that wanted to vote because it's embedded in the Constitution at that point.
I mean, I could see that idea. I don't think in Oklahoma it would ever be possible for a community to allow someone who is not a citizen to vote, just in the way that our state runs.
All right. So we had 781 and 781 tried to implement some criminal justice reform. We're still the highest incarcerator of women in the country and maybe even the world. What do we need to do? Because obviously 780 and 781 didn't work. Unless you think we have have more crime in Oklahoma among women than anybody else.
No, not at all. What I'm on my laugh on that is the sense that 780 and 781 was a great step forward, and if the legislature actually funded 781, then we would see progress. But we're not putting the funding aside for diversion programs like we are supposed to, because the whole point is if we don't incarcerate the person, then whatever money we save from not incarcerating them goes into the fund to help with diversion programs to keep further diverting people out of prison. But we're not putting the money towards it. And so because we're not putting the money towards it, now all of a sudden, it's failing, and we just have to fund it, quite honestly. We have seen in this last session several bills that would try to reverse 780, so making it back from $1,000 back down to $500, trying to reverse and put different drugs back in that 780 had taken out, and there's already this push to go back. I think we would only just further incarcerate more people. And then for the issue of women, I mean, honestly, it's really hard to be a woman in the state of Oklahoma. We had a survey and presentation a couple years ago by one of our members, Abby Davis, on the status of women. And it was pretty bleak. Well, it hasn't improved any. We are like the bottom state for health and well-being of women in our state. And it goes to the all-out abortion ban. Now you may say, well, hold on, Trish. No, it does. Because what ends up happening is the next step is going to be, okay, did she miscarry or did she have an abortion? well, just to be safe, let's charge her. And that's what's gonna happen next. We can say, no, that's not. It is. It's been happening in other places. And the way the sense is in the legislature, there is a distrust of women, there is a distrust of doctors, there is, a distrust of our own people, which is really, really hard, because what I see in our community is quite the opposite. And so I think that as far as incarcerating women, it'll only get worse.
So as a follow-up to that, and I don't have this written here at all, but we have seen examples in some counties in this state of women being prosecuted who have delivered healthy babies, but they can identify that she had maybe had a marijuana card and she used marijuana during her pregnancy, and now she's being prosecuted for child endangerment.
Yeah.
So how does the legislature fix that, or does the legislature want to fix that?
Well,
Do you want to fix that?
I would love to fix that, quite honestly, just in the sense that I think about the women in my mother's age range and who drank when they were pregnant. I mean, it's a similar situation. We didn't hold them accountable for drinking, but at the same time, a marijuana card, then that is, okay, no, that is an offense. I think we've got to take a pause and really think about it, and think about, okay, who are the knowledgeable experts? Who do we bring into this to make sure that we are looking at the issues going on? What is causing the environment where drug use is being fostered? What is that? Can we address that to maybe then stem the idea of using drugs as self-medication?
Okay. So something that bothers me a lot as somebody who's been a school board member and somebody who is a city council member who has to follow the Open Meeting Act and the Open Records Act,
Yes,
is the legislature has exempted itself from those acts.
that is correct.
And I don't believe that is appropriate, and I would like to know what you think about that.
Interesting. Well, that's all I know, quite honestly. Being a member of the legislature, we are not privy to Open Meetings Act or open records. Pretty much all we do is pretty transparent. I mean, you see what our votes on the floor, you see our committees, we broadcast all of that. They're open to the public, all of those things. But you do have the backroom dealings that cannot happen at the school board and cannot happen with the city council. So how would we do that? And how would we get consensus if the caucus couldn't talk amongst themselves? I don't know what that would look like, quite honestly, seeing as I've never experienced it. Would I be open to looking at and finding a way? Yes, I would be. But I don't know that feasibly if the political environment of our legislature would be open to that at all.
Okay, so let's flip that around. Our county commissioners have their 3 members. If any 2 of them talk outside of a meeting, they've technically violated the act.
So then maybe we need
but
to
they're
look
still
at that.
held. But they're still held to the act.
Right.
So
Interesting.
if they've got to figure it out, you guys ought to figure it out too, from my perspective.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. So we have competing forces battling over St. Isidore of Seville Catholic Virtual School, which ultimately, if greenlighted by the U.S. Supreme Court, would become the first state-funded religious school in the country. Do you support this use of our tax dollars, and why or why not?
I do not. And we've had the last couple of years the talk of tax credits for private school to give parents other options for education. And as a public school educator, as a public school student, as a mother whose children went to public schools, I believe in the common good of public education. When it comes to choices and options, not public school doesn't fit everyone, and there are folks who homeschool or they send their children to private school, but that should be at their expense, quite honestly. And because once you give public funds to a private institution, it is no longer public. They don't have to report. So we learned this with EPIC charter schools, in the sense that once that public dollars went into the private side, all of a sudden those dollars were not accounted for, and they were considered private. And so therefore that funding would be used for the activity fund and all of these different things, but it wasn't fully reportable. So when it comes to public dollars, those strings are attached so that way we can pull them back and go, okay, where was that money spent? When it goes to private, it doesn't. So then we have the possibility of fraud. We have the possibility of mismanagement. Does that mean that St. Isidora is going to fraud or mismanage? No, not at all. But there is that possibility. The fact that it is a private Catholic institution, then the separation of church and state comes into question. And you know, there were quite a few. I know this is going to sound like it's not related, but it is. Last session, we had a big push to disassemble the JNC, the Judicial Nominating Committee. And there was a really big push to just like, we don't want to do it. We want to make sure that the governor can appoint. And it died in the legislature. It didn't get passed. But now there is a big push to vote out 3 Democrat-appointed judges. And that would mean that if those are recalled, then Governor Stitt would then be able to appoint 3 more judges. And so that is in reaction to St. Isidora. Because, sorry, my apologies. Because then they would have a much more agreeable Supreme Court, state Supreme Court, to go forward with this, because they want it to go to the Supreme Court, and they want to challenge the division between church and state. I am a Christian. A lifelong Christian. I grew up Nazarene, and now I'm a Methodist, and it's, you know, I believe in God, in Christ, and all of that, but I also believe that there is a way that we can teach children that is not mentioning Christ and all of that. I did it. I mean, I led by example for 15 years teaching music at Westwood Elementary. But when it comes to the money, public money needs to stay with public schools. The idea of the tax credit, the voucher went through. We're going to see much more money leave our state or leave public institutions to private schools because of that, because it's going to be even more. Tuition goes up the same amount as that tax credit it does, and we're going to see at a larger expense, but our educational outcomes will be worse. Imagine if we took all of that money and funneled it right towards public education, what would happen? I'll tell you, Stillwater Christian Academy right here in town, they raised their tuition the same amount as the voucher. And you know where they did with that money? They paid their teachers. They paid their teachers, which is a great way to use that money, yes. But imagine if we actually took the money towards public education, put it towards the classroom, put it towards our teachers, put it towards all of the expenses that we have now to raise that funding formula to the point that we don't have so many schools that are this way, that they're actually more equal, I think would be a much better use of our taxpayer dollars.
Okay, I have a lot more questions, but what I want to do at the moment is have our microphone handlers get up, and we're going to take some from the floor and see what you are interested in, and we'll see how that goes, and I may go back to my questions, and we may just take your questions. So who has a question for Representative Ranson? Oh, there we go.
You were talking about how amendments or issues come up on the ballot, and I know that there has been a issue or a petition for raising the minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that that was verified, but it's not on this
Nope.
the ballot. You want to talk about that?
Absolutely. So there was a ballot initiative that went out to gain signatures to raise the minimum wage, and There were two entities that were very much against it, the State Chamber and the Farm Bureau, and they were vocal. So I'm not saying anything like, oh my gosh, she's talking bad. No, they're vocal about being against this. And I get the pros and the cons. If we raise the minimum wage, then we're going to have businesses go out of business. But we also know that if we raise the minimum wage, we need to do something because we have people who are drowning, and we have businesses that are having a hard time finding workforce. So all of these things. The signatures went out, and I signed the petition myself, so I'll just be really clear about that too. And it gained more signatures than it needed. And what has happened in the last couple of years, ever since medical marijuana, that initiative, the way that we collect our signatures has changed. The way we count the signatures has changed. And the process in which we're counting the signatures takes longer. So that is what ended up happening with this. The signature count took longer. Verifying a count. We also passed a bill this last session, I believe, that would extend the period after all of the signatures have been collected to rebut and to argue against it. So they've gained more time as well. Well, all of that has passed, and the governor, is up to him to set the election date, and he set it for June of 2026. So here is an issue, whether it's, whatever the issue is, this is an issue that the people felt compelled enough to get signatures to put forward, to put on a ballot, that then was thwarted by time and by all of those who are involved, so that way then it's 2026. And will we still be having this situation? Will we address the issues before then? I doubt it, quite honestly. The way the legislature has been, we have a supermajority Republican legislature, and the least amount of money we spend, the better. So I don't see them wanting to address it.
All right. Rachel, did you have a question? Okay, Ivan.
Hi, Trish. I was looking at your literature, and you list under objectives the first one being Early Childhood Task Force.
Mm-hmm.
Fund early childhood needs. Would you say more about what you
Absolutely.
see there?
So this last year, actually the last 2 years, we were finishing up with the COVID dollars for supporting our DHS and our child care. This went into the subsidies for low-income families. These families, either to apply for subsidy, they need to be working or in school, one of the two. And it upped the subsidy to a point where they could still afford childcare. And those dollars were going to run out, and we knew they were going to run out at the end of September of this year. So just a couple weeks ago, it ran out. So I had prepared for some bills that would align up with the federal guidelines. The federal guidelines coming down is that states need to provide subsidy for childcare. It needs to be at least 75% of the rate, and it needs to make sure that any copay that the parents are charged does not go over 7% of their monthly income. And then our child care centers need to be scheduled or structured around an enrollment policy rather than attendance. And so our child care centers, our subsidy is by attendance. And so it's going to take some time. It's a tech issue, but it's not a really expensive tech issue, which I was told it was a really expensive tech issue. $70 million is going to cost. I'm like, it's not going to cost $70 million, but still. And so I put forward a couple of bills to say, okay, this is coming. Federal guidelines are coming. Federal money is going away. We need to prepare. What is the state going to do to make sure that we're ready and that we don't have families all of a sudden going, whoa, I have no childcare? I can't afford this. Okay, one of us has to stay home. That causes a whole lot of economic tailspin going on there, going from two incomes to one. And in 2024, it's very difficult to live on one income instead of two. So I was like, okay, let's prepare for it. Because we see it coming. I'm not the only one who sees it coming. We all do. Let's address it. And the state puts forward the bare minimum in order to pull down the federal dollars to match. So it's like, okay, we need to do this, and we need to go to enrollment, and we need to see about how to do this. And then it was like, okay, well, other states have gotten into this pathway of they have a agency in the state government which has it's all early childhood, and early childhood from birth to 5 in health, in care, and in education. Anything that is encapsulated in that area is one agency, because they all share the same similar funding streams, federal, state, and so forth. So that was the idea of the task force. Okay, let's put an early childhood task force together. How could we supply and provide supports for our early childhood, our young families? How could we provide these supports in a way that is the most efficient and it makes the most sense? And so that was the whole idea with the task force. I went on the premise of going towards an agency, standalone agency, and I got a lot of pushback on that. And so I'm gonna work on that with some of the members to see what's going on. I will say that, the pushback was, oh, you're growing government. Anytime anyone wants to spend money, you're growing government. We don't want to do that. I'm like, well, hold on. I don't think spending money is growing government. I think investing what we need to is important for the running of government, and that's a different thing. But this agency is not necessarily growing government, it's just taking what all the different agencies have and putting it in one place. Kind of like Service Oklahoma for our tags and our licenses, that kind of thing. So I was trying to go that route. I still have a lot more work to do. I'm gonna hopefully get a working group together with some legislators who have some with childcare in their background and their expertise to kind of say, okay, what can we do going forward? Because it's a big issue. And it's not just a woman's issue, it is a workforce issue. If we don't have available and accessible quality childcare for our children, then we do not have gainful employees. We do not have people who are working in the community and paying taxes and doing all of the things that we want them to do. So that is a really important thing. So that's my take on that. Okay.
All right, Rachel.
This is a more like leadership and work style question, but I consider my vote to be very valuable. So when I give it to you, I want to know, especially after campaigning with Seth, like what you're doing is a ton of work. So thank you.
You're welcome.
But like, what are you doing, especially being in the minority party? Mm-hmm. What are your intentional strategies for working with people across the aisle? I know, people are people, they're messy, right? You like some of them, you don't like some of them. But I know that, to get anything done, especially in the minority, you've got to be very intentional. So what's your strategy on that?
So strategies. I have quite a few, actually. So my job is on this plane is basically making as many friends as I can and making friends with people across the aisle, because yes, I am in the super minority. There are 20 Democrats in the House, 81 Republicans. The Republicans can pass anything they want, even taxes, they could do, but they wouldn't do that, but I'm just gonna say. They can do all that in their own caucus, so they don't need the Democrats for that. So my strategy as a minority member is actually asking questions. And I don't ask questions mean, I don't ask questions, gotcha questions, those kinds of things. My questions are who, what, when, where, how. Because I want to know where it's coming from, how does it affect people? If you say it's going to affect people here, but what about this? And I want to make sure that it's inclusive as possible. So that's where my structure is as far as how I handle myself. But making friends across the aisle, and there are people that I do not get along with. If I see them in the hallway, I take another route. There are those people in the legislature. But there are also people that I think, okay, we can't agree on anything. And I find time and time again that there is always something we can agree on. And if there's something that we can agree on, then we can work together. And I just had this last week. There was an interim study in public health, and it was about rural medicine, rural hospitals. And they were talking about increasing the availability of physician's assistants and nurse practitioners to provide health care into the rural areas. And the vice chair, Toni Hassenbach, she is from Elgin, and she and I have been known to debate against each other multiple times on bills. And personally, I like her. She's a nice person. But a lot of the things that she believes in and espouses to, I don't agree with. But she basically said out loud, all right there, she goes, I think we need to hit pause, because I don't think that we need to offer less trained care in the rural areas that we do urban. And I just looked at her and I thought, ding, there's one thing we can agree on, because it's like emergency certified teachers. And we know how that has worked so far, and it's not been successful. So if we go for less trained health professionals in our rural areas, we're not going to get the health outcomes that we're wanting. So it's trying to do that. It's working on bills that I see that are not bad, but I think they could be a little bit better, and working with that author to make it better. There was an author several years ago. He's our treasurer now. What's our treasurer's name? It's not Gann. It's
I'm drawing a complete blank. Who
I
knows
know.
who the state treasurer is? Well, there you go.
There you go. Anyway, he had this bill, and it came out. It was basically to educate college kids on sex trafficking. Okay, well, all right, that's great. That's a great thing. We need to educate, that way they avoid it and they know how to protect themselves. Yes, but you know what? It's not a college problem. It's actually quite young. It's middle school. So how do we train middle schoolers in an age-appropriate way in order to avoid trafficking? And so I had a conversation with him. I said, this is a really great idea, but you're missing the demographic. Can we bring it down to middle school? And he agreed. And it was like, okay, so we can find things. Even someone who is way far right, I can help with making something better. So I just have to keep showing up and keep doing it.
Okay. Any questions on this side of the room? Dr. Holbrook.
So, Congresswoman, I've been voting and living in Oklahoma for over half my life, which is, well, we won't go there.
Yeah,
been
it
a
might
while.
find you.
So it seems like during that time I've witnessed that Oklahoma seems to be in the bottom third in so many different categories.
We're number one in incarceration of women.
That's
and
not
so
what we want to be number
well,
one in.
That's one. So would you prioritize maybe what you think are the top several, let's say 3 or 4 things that the legislature could and should be looking at to move us up, at least above the median in the United States in these various rankings, education being one of them, women and the treatment, the welfare of women, child care. The list just goes on and on and on and on. And it seems like we just haven't made much progress. So the question is, what are you think are the principal issues that we could do something about to raise us at least above the median among the states in the United States?
That's a really great question. I'll tell you what I think our number one problem is, and I will tell you what I think our number one barrier to addressing that problem is. And the number one problem that we have is our high rate of poverty. That is our number one problem. And that affects food security, housing security, transportation security, that affects education, that affects health, that affects the workforce. All walks and areas of life are touched by poverty. And you can say, well, Trish, I'm not poor. Okay, but the fact that we have such a high level of poverty, then we have a lot of competition for resources. Our resources that we put forward are not ample. And I know that Leslie Osborne, our labor commissioner, has come and talked to us several times. And I'm going to use her words because they're true. We are bottom 10 in taxation. So we get what we pay for. We will not be anything more than bottom 10 because we don't have the taxation network to provide that. That being said, do I say that we should tax everyone more? No, but we should actually put our resources to where they can do the most. So the number one barrier that I see is our leadership in the legislature. We have a very conservative leadership, and it has been very much the governor on the way down has said, okay, we want flat budgets. We don't want anyone ask for any more money. And we're going to sock money away. So in 2023 and 2024, I told you about the federal dollars that were coming to the states because of COVID. We were awash in federal dollars. And quite honestly, if we hadn't gotten those federal dollars, we would be in dire straits right now. But those federal dollars helped us keep afloat. But instead of taking that money and reinvesting it in one-time investments, in services that are necessary to help pull people out of poverty, they stuck it away in the sock drawer. 2023, $1 billion went in the sock drawer. $1 billion with a B. And the budget was presented like, oh, this is a great budget. It helps a little bit here, here, and here. Everybody's happy. And I'm like, no, you left $1 billion to do nothing. It's not like it's going to be a high yield or anything like that. It's just stuck in the sock drawer. It's doing nothing. And then this year, 2024, same thing. This budget does this, it does this. Everyone's happy. And I'm still a no because it was $1.341 billion that we did not appropriate. And it's put aside. And then the governor talks about how wonderful our state is. We have all these billions of dollars in savings. Okay, for what? I mean, I understand an economic downturn. We do have a rainy day fund. It is full. Constitutionally, it is full. This is $2 billion plus on top that we could have been putting into our communities, that we could be looking at what are the real issues. How do we move the needle on education? How do we move the needle on childcare? How do we move the needle on health outcomes? And instead, we're like, oh, I don't know. It's just poor things, No. That's the whole point of being there at the legislature, and what frustrates me the most. It is hard work to get your vote. It is. It's great work, but it's hard work. And it doesn't stop there. The work continues at the legislature, and to be surrounded by so many legislators who are there for the good time, quite honestly, not for the work. And I think that that is a travesty to our population, to our citizens. I mean, yeah, you want to know what I'm doing? This is what I'm doing. I'm in the committees. I'm making friends with people that make me want to punch them. I'm doing it because I know the more connections I have and the more ability to do my job the best that I can, the better for everyone in here. And when Stillwater does well, the state does well. We are a microcosm of the state of Oklahoma. We have the answers. We have experts who know, but we don't trust them. And that is a shame. We need to change that.
Okay, we're bumping up against 1 o'clock. So
Oh,
I'm going to give you
geez.
a minute or so to just sort of wrap up whatever else is on your mind, and then we're going to shut it down.
Okay, well, thank you for your time. I really do. Like I said before, this is hard work to run for office. And I have been knocking doors. I have been making phone calls. I've been going to all the meetings. I believe it's important to know as many people in the community because then once I do, then I can ask you for your opinion on things. I've texted quite a few of you in this room when I'm on the House floor of like, okay, I'm looking at a bill. This doesn't look right. and getting your perspective, because that's how we work together to represent. I've done this job for 6 years. I am the chair of the Minority Caucus. There are days that are very hard, but it's good work, and it's work that needs to be done. And so I ask you to vote Ranson on November 5th to put me back into the House. Thank you.
Okay, so we are. All right, so the election is on November 5th. Your polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. at your polling place. Early voting starts October 30th. It'll be from 8 in the morning until 6 at night, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. On Saturday, it'll be from 8 to 2. All of that at the Stillwater Public Library, not at the election board. So make a point, if you're going to vote early, go to the library, because they won't be at the election board.
And that Saturday is also homecoming parade. So
There you
just
go.
so you know.
Just so you know, it's a busy day.
Yes, it's going to be a busy day on Saturday.
All right, so Trish, thanks for being here.
Thank
Thanks
you.
to all of you for being here. And Mr. President,